COD Mobile finally added a new rank mode for the first time in a really long time, and I, for one, am really excited about it. Those of you who watch Pro COD Mobile will likely recognize the control mode and the fact that it's now been added into ranked. It involves a lot of really cool elements from some of your other favorite rank modes and combines them all into one to make one really fun objective-based mode that also heavily involves slaying. So whether you're an OBJ main, a passive beamer, or an aggressive slayer, there's something in this mode for everybody. The one thing about it is that it plays very differently from every other mode in COD Mobile, so today we're going to be giving you guys a list of everything you need to know before you hop into control mode in COD Mobile. First thing you need to know is you have to be at least Grandmaster in order to play this. I honestly don't hate that rule because control does require a lot more strategy than most other game modes in COD Mobile, and I wouldn't really hate the separation of ranks for different modes, including limiting frontline and TDM to some of the lower ranks in the game. I know some of you are going to get mad at that, so it can be just frontline. Second thing you need to know is how the game works. Control is basically the combination of a few different game modes. First, similar to domination, it has two different objectives that need to be captured. Second, similar to search and destroy, it has an offensive and defensive side where the spawns are secured, and also a limited amount of lives, that being 30 lives per round. Obviously, one of the big concerns is that this could just turn into a big TDM, and especially if you have teammates that can't win gunfights, then they can just feed away all your lives. Teammates are limited to 8 lives per round, which means that after those 8 lives, they will simply stop respawning, which will obviously make it more difficult to capture the objective, but does give you an opportunity to play TDM and still win the round that way. Another thing you need to know is that unlike search and destroy, it does go back and forth between offense and defense on every round. So rather than having all of your offensive rounds in a row and then switching to defense, it goes back and forth, and there's actually a tiebreaker that decides whether or not you get the defensive side in the final round. Control is definitely a very defensive oriented game mode, so this is important. If it ends up going to around number 5, the team that gets the defensive side in the last round will be the team that has captured the most objectives. So while obviously you can win a round by simply getting kills, if you do so without capturing objectives while the other team does it by capturing objectives, then in the 5th round they'll be awarded with the defensive side, which on pretty much every map is going to give you some type of advantage. The next thing you need to know is that some maps are a little bit more well optimized for control than others, so this is something you should keep in mind when voting. Raid and Standoff are both competitive maps for control in the COD Mobile World Championships, and as such have additional spawn points that have been added in that make it more difficult for the opposition to spawn trap. What this means is that if somebody is looking at a spawn point or inside of a spawn point, it'll force you to spawn out in other directions, which makes it more difficult for them to track you down. However, with firing range, there's basically only one spawn point on both sides, and that means if you're going up against a team that starts to get you into a spawn trap, there's not really any way that you'll be able to escape. Obviously, if you're the team that's doing the spawn trapping, then this can be fun, but if you're somewhat newer to the mode and not still 100% sure what you're doing strategically, I would personally recommend voting for Standoff and Raid to give yourself the best chance at learning the mode without going into a complete rage. The next point goes back to something that I mentioned earlier, in that control typically tends to be a little bit more defensive sided. One of the big reasons for this is the fact that there's no ability to flip spawns whenever it comes to control, so as opposed to hardpoint where you can spawn pretty much anywhere on the map, even though there are various spawn points that you can spawn in, you're always going to be spawning in the same direction, which makes it pretty easy for the opposition to predict where you're going to be coming from. As the team that has to capture the objective on the offensive side, you're forced to play into whatever the defense gives you, meaning that if you're going up against an opponent that actually knows how to play the game mode, then the majority of the time they'll be taking advantage of all the head glitches they can and hiding in unexpected positions to give themselves the best chance at getting kills and trying to dwindle down that life amount. The next thing you need to keep in mind when it comes to the way that you play control is that score streaks and operators are extra important, and because of that, need to be a lot more calculated in the way that you use them. I think the way a lot of people tend to play hardpoint and domination is basically as soon as you get an operator or a score streak, you instantly call it in and try to get as much value as you can. Because control is split up into 5 different rounds, the amount of impact that you can have with a specific operator or score streak can be a lot bigger. Calling in a UAV or an operator when your team is already down by 10 lives potentially throws away a lot of value that you could have in a later round when you have a much better chance at winning. Pulling out your operators and score streaks at the beginning of a round also gives your team a much better chance of getting a spawn trap, which if executed correctly can allow you to end a round very quickly and put the opposition at a very big disadvantage, as they won't have had any of those kills to build up score streaks and operators of their own. This is something that you'll see very regularly when it comes to competitive Call of Duty Mobile and specifically the World Championships, that teams invest a lot of firepower into operators and score streaks at the beginning of rounds to either clear off an objective very quickly and allow themselves to capture it to give themselves more time to work with, or like I said before, to enact a spawn trap, which can turn into a snowball effect and give you more advantage in the later rounds. Obviously, unlike in Search and Destroy, in Control, your score streaks do carry over from one round to another, and you have operators players, that especially if you get into a 1v2 or a 1v3 situation, can give you a huge advantage and a much better chance at clutching. I don't want to make the video too long, so that's going to wrap things up for now, but if you guys want to see advanced tips and tricks for control, if this video hits 5,000 likes, we'll do a video breaking down some professional control players and things that they do to give themselves the best chance at winning. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.